Let's go for a little ride.
Muscle cars, half-naked girls, late-night street races, over-the-top action sequences, deep-voiced bald men, the regular reminder of the importance of family. Put those all together and you have the Fast and Furious franchise, the legendary movie series featuring Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. It's one of the most iconic franchises of all time and I absolutely love it to death. Now it's time to share my thoughts on the series. I've wanted to cover the series for a long time, and now feels like the perfect time. Be warned, if you haven't seen the series, there will be slight spoilers. It all began in 2015. Until that point, I only knew Paul Walker from the 2003 movie Timeline, and Vin Diesel from The Iron Giant and The Pacifier from 2005. I swear that movie is actually good. But if you ask anyone else about Paul or Vin, at least 80% of them will mention a Fast and Furious movie. I had no idea what these movies were about, only that they involved speedy muscle cars. I knew Paul Walker played a cop, but that was about it. Of course, I remember reading about Paul Walker's death in 2013. It's a shame, but I didn't really know him from anything other than Timeline, a very unpopular movie. And then of course, in 2015, I see a poster for Furious 7. I remember thinking, oh Jesus, a 7th movie? Obviously, I had no idea how financially successful the franchise was. $5 billion as of 2017. Fucking hell, these movies are popular. Eventually, my girlfriend bought Sky Digital, including the Sky Movie channels. One day in 2016, what comes on but The Fast and the Furious, the first movie in this franchise. You know what? Fuck it. It's now time for me to finally experience this thing. I need to know if it's good or not. The first movie introduced me to Brian O'Connor, a police officer and racing enthusiast sent undercover to infiltrate a gang of thieves led by Dominic Toretto. Eventually, Brian gets himself in too deep, at one point getting friendly with Dom's sister, Mia. After a gang member is injured in an attempted heist, Brian reveals his true identity in an attempt to secure priority medical assistance, pretty much losing the trust of Dominic. After attempting to arrest Dom and killing members of a crime family and rival racing crew, Brian rescues Dom from his overturned Dodge Charger and gives him the keys to his car, thus providing an escape route for Dom and effectively throwing away his police badge.
You know what you're doing?
I owe you a 10-second car.
Overall, it was a mixed experience. I considered the first movie to be better than Timeline, but I had a really bad opinion regarding Brian O'Connor. Granted, Dom was involved in serious illegal activity, but Brian attempting to arrest him left a really bad taste in my mouth. God forbid he actually does his job as a police officer. Even after he surrendered his keys to Dom, I was still not super fond of his character. That was 1 film down and 6 to go. Unfortunately, I was not in a super huge rush to watch the next movie, which I suspect had to do with the fact that only Brian returned for this movie. I mean, Christ, I could barely remember his name, or Dom's name, or Mia's name, or Letty's name, or anyone's name. It was at least a month later when I was able to talk myself into watching movie 2. This time, a rogue Brian is recruited by the FBI to investigate Carter Verone, a drug lord operating out of Miami. I remember my attention span being rather vague for the first half of the movie, but it was the ending that gave me a good laugh, when Brian and Roman walk away with some recovered drug money, intended to be used as evidence against Verone. Very nice, Brian, very nice. I feel like you're starting to grow on me here. I might just give the rest of the series a go. After a quick browse on Wikipedia, I learned about the other movies and that Dominic Toretto appeared in the third movie, Tokyo Drift. Within a week, I was able to find movie number 3, this one starring Lucas Black in Tokyo. Tokyo Drift takes place in Tokyo, who would have thunk? In the end, I rather liked it. It felt like the original movie with a hint of the Karate Kid. New kid in town, there's a popular fad going around, in this case drifting. The new guy gives it a go and fails. Some old stranger takes him under his wing and teaches him what he needs to know. In the end, the old guy, in this case a man named Han, dies in a car accident. The new kid, known as Sean Boswell, goes on to win the race by nailing the drifting technique. I like this one. I mean, granted, Lucas Black's accent is awful, but I thought the plot was decent. It was nice to see Dom pop up at the end. It's like it's their way of saying, Dom's back and a 4th movie is on the way. I was feeling rather intrigued at this point. Dom was just a gang leader in the first movie, and suddenly he was coming back with Paul Walker. Colour me interested. Another scan of Wikipedia told me I had actually watched the movies out of chronological order. I was supposed to have watched Tokyo Drift after Fast and Furious 6. Ah, shit. I'm willing to bet my interest in the fourth movie would not have been so high had I not known Dom and Brian were coming back. Nevertheless, I had to see number 4, Fast and Furious? That's the movie title? But the first movie was... and this one was... forget it. Fast and Furious reunites Brian and Dom as they search for the same man, drug lord Arturo Braga, for their own reasons. Dom because his girlfriend Letty was murdered by a henchman of Braga's, and Brian because, well, Braga's a drug lord and Brian's now FBI, and the FBI are usually very interested in drug lords. Inevitably, Brian crosses paths with Dom and Mia. Oh boy, this is not awkward in the slightest. Nah, I'm sure Mia doesn't hold a grudge about Brian lying to her in order to arrest her brother. And I'm sure Dom doesn't hold any bitter feelings. Oh, that doesn't look good. After a confrontation with Letty's killer goes sour, Brian and Dom are more or less forced to cooperate to gain access to Braga. As you'd expect, Brian and Mia work out their issues, and Brian and Dom regain their trust of each other. On the other hand, Brian is suffering from a familiar dilemma. He has a strong feeling of loyalty towards Dom and his crew, but at the same time he has a secure career with the FBI. It's made even worse when he's instructed to arrest and bring in not only Braga, but Dominic as well. Oh bother, I'm detecting a slight conflict of interest here. He's just worked all his shit out with Mia and Dom, and I may have to arrest him in the end as well. After Brian offers a deal to the FBI, the capture of Braga in exchange for Dom's freedom, the duo travel to Mexico and are able to apprehend Braga, after which they pursue Letty's killer. Brian crashes his car after taking fire, and Phoenix the killer prepares to kill him as well. Okay, that was awesome. This movie is really, really good.
Pussy.
As the police approach, a severely injured Brian tells Dom to flee. Dom decides he's through with running and sticks by Brian. I think it's safe to say these two trust each other again. Despite Brian's requests, Dom is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison without parole. Oh, for fuck's sake! As Dom is transported to prison by bus, a group of muscle cars approach, led by Brian and Mia. Oh my god, I so know what's going to happen here! This was the point where I was convinced. I need to see the rest of the movies. This is going great. If there's any part of the series that shows the importance of trust and family, it's the ending to movie 4. Brian makes a deal with the feds regarding Dom. They go back on their word. Brian turns in his badge, throws away another secure career, and solidifies himself as a member of Dom's crew. And oh my god, this is fucking great! By the time the credits began to roll, I was officially a fan of the Fast and Furious series. I had only seen 4 movies out of 7, but I was already preparing for the rest of them. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I was more than ready, and that last ending sealed the deal. Next day, I had Fast 5, continuing straight on from the last movie, with Brian and Mia freeing Dom from the prison bus. The 3 of them are officially wanted criminals, pursued by DSS agent Luke Hobbs, under the assumption that Brian and Dom killed a group of DEA agents in a heist involving seized cars. It was just a heist that went sour. Brian just had to make a call.
Shitty call, O'Connor. Shitty call.
Towards the end, Brian and Dom plot to steal $100 million in cash from Brazilian drug lord Hernan Reyes. The franchise seems to really love drug lords. The money is being held in a large safe in a police station filled with the most corrupt police force in Brazil. How on earth are they going to relieve Reyes of all that money? Simple, yet totally unexpected. Brian and Dom hook some cables from their muscle cars to the station wall and floor it. Out comes the safe full of drug money. Holy motherfucking shit, that is the greatest thing ever! I had only seen the movie once, and yet I knew Fast 5 was easily going to make my top 10 list for the best movies I have ever seen. It wasn't going to compete with Back to the Future, Groundhog Day or The Italian Job, but it was definitely up there. That final car chase through Rio with the safe full of cash was a guaranteed winner for me. Without even looking at the end of Fast 5, I went straight into FNF 6 and was left speechless when Hobbs visited Dom with surprising news. Letty is alive and is working for a mercenary by the name of Owen Shaw. Dom may have settled down with Elena from Fast 5, but he has to find out if it's true. Fast forward through the birth of Brian's son, a chase through the streets of London, the revelation about Letty, and the hijacking of a military convoy, and that's Fast and Furious 6. It's a good movie. Not as good as Fast 5, but I still enjoyed it. At the end of number 6, Han, a member of Dom's crew from movie 4 onward, relocates to Japan, setting up the events of Tokyo Drift. As seen in the third movie, Han dies on a traffic collision. The driver of the offending car is Deckard Shaw, out to avenge his brother Owen. And let me just say this, Deckard Shaw has pretty much the greatest character introduction of all time.
Dominic Toretto. You don't know me. You're about to.
This sets up Furious 7. I knew in advance that Jason Statham was in the movie, and this was all I needed to know. He was the bad guy. On the other hand, I had one big question about what lay ahead. Paul Walker died before the movie was finished. How on earth were they going to pull this off? Were they going to kill Brian? Were they going to retire the character? Let's have a look. So whilst Brian fights between being in Dom's crew and having a normal life with Mia and his son, Dom and the gang pursue Deckard Shaw across 2 continents to avenge Han. That's the moral of Furious 7 and the Fast and Furious franchise in a nutshell. You just don't fuck with a man's family. Overall, Furious 7 was a great movie, but there was one scene that really did it for me. Every FNF fan knows what scene I'm talking about. Brian's goodbye scene at the end. He decides to retire from the crew and become a stay-at-home father. It's probably the most fitting way he could have gone out. Even without Paul Walker to finish it, they absolutely nailed this movie, and the ending is no exception. Very rarely do I get emotional during a movie, but this one got to me. Fantastic ending to a fantastic movie. Second best film in the series as far as I'm concerned. That's all 7 movies down, and I love it. The film series is great. I need to get the DVDs of these immediately. I give it a month at absolute most before I finally bought these. As you'd expect, they went straight into the DVD player. Time to see how well they hold up. I actually developed a higher level of appreciation for the first 2 movies. Too Fast, Too Furious was actually a fair bit better than I remember. Tokyo Drift was another story. I liked it when I first saw it. After watching every movie up to Fast 6, chronological order after all, it was time for Tokyo Drift. And it was the biggest drop in quality I had ever seen with a movie. It was one of the most boring movies I had ever watched. I was genuinely surprised at this. I enjoyed the movie the first time. The second time round, after watching every other movie, Jesus Christ on a stick, it was horrible. The plot was nowhere near as entertaining as it was the first time round. And Lucas Black's voice was even worse than I remembered. At first, I thought he was just putting on a fake accent for the role, but after watching the 2010 film Legion, also starring Tyrese Gibson, aka Roman, I was horrified to learn that was his actual voice. It's so fucking painful to the ears! As of this video, Tokyo Drift is the only Fast and Furious movie I actively dislike. I'll happily watch the other movies, just not this one. Fortunately, other than Han's death, it holds virtually no important plot points relating to the subsequent movies, and that gets covered in Fast and Furious 6 anyway, rendering this movie entirely worthless in my eyes. Finally, we make it to Fate of the Furious. When I saw the theatre ads for this, I was more than ready. But there was one thing that caught me off guard. Dominic Toretto goes rogue. Oh boy, where are they going to go with this? Nonetheless, I went to see it last summer, and it was amazing. Between the action and the chemistry between Hobbs and Deckard Shaw, I currently rank it as the 3rd best movie in the franchise. It was that amazing to me. I was determined to go into the movie spoiler-free. One simple Google scan of Brian O'Connor told me that Dominic names his new son after Brian. Dom has a kid too? Holy crap, there's a lot going on. I knew he had a kid, I just had no idea the mother was Elena and not Letty. Still, at the end of the movie, it didn't stop me thinking, you're naming him Brian? Oh, Dom, you bald asshole. I do need to make something quite clear. The absence of Paul Walker is very, very noticeable. At one point, Roman actually mentions the possibility of bringing Brian back to the crew to figure out the reason behind Dom's apparent betrayal. Regardless, this movie knows exactly how to tribute Paul 4 years after his death, and it is beautiful. I bought the DVD of Fate in October, about 3 months after seeing it in theatres, and after watching it a second time, I remember exactly why I consider it the best movie of 2017. It still holds up incredibly well.
You're gonna shoot a baby? You sick bastard.
We'll end this topic with the future of the series. They plan to wrap the series up at the 10th movie, which means they'll no doubt pull off something massive in the final 2 movies, perhaps as a 2-parter finale. There's also the upcoming spin-off for Luke Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson's character, also starring Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw. After seeing how well these 2 characters worked in Fate of the Furious, this movie's also on the watch list when that comes out in 2019. Then there's the final 2 movies due to be released in April 2020 and 2021. There's talk about Jordana Brewster returning to the series as Mia, which leads me to think we'll be seeing Brian again. Paul Walker's brothers have spoken out and are up for bringing Brian back, even if it's just for a cameo. I'm a little bit mixed on this one. While I would like to see Brian return, I also think they gave him the perfect send-off in Furious 7. There's also the dilemma of how they'd accomplish this, and what they do with Brian. If he does make a return, a small part of me thinks the producers will kill the character off, leading Dom in a final pursuit across the globe to avenge his emotional brother. Only time will tell. Woohoo! 8 movies covered in this one video. Right, let's do something different next time. Something short. Something from TV, perhaps.